All right, guys, welcome to another video. We got a surprise yesterday at Reset. Margaret and Gajah Mada are now in the dailies. I was expecting Margaret, but also I was expecting it to happen a little bit later, right? It almost just came out of nowhere. They popped them in here. So now we got to talk about Siege, right? Because first of all, who do you invest in? Should it be Gajah Mada or Margaret? There's people that are advocating for both. And then when you should get a Siege March, and then what's like the minimum viable equipment, and also how far should you get the commanders before you use them? Okay, so first of all, Siege is obviously a newer thing to the rock consciousness. Me personally, beginning of April, I saw a Mr. Siege video where he was actually essentially saying that Babur's Cordoba was out dueling the best field dueling marches we have, right? So like Nevsky Hua, at the time Gorgo Luce, right? And just like all these other marchers that we thought were really good at dueling, 1v1 against Babur Cordova, the engineering march was winning. And that was when I decided I wanted to do a siege march, because I always thought siege was really squishy when people got close, but if the siege can actually win in duels 1v1, all of a sudden it became way more powerful than I thought it was going to be, right? I made a video on April 4th saying what if the ideal 7 March setup included a siege. I would say most people were, I guess maybe they found it mildly interesting, probably a little skeptical. Some were just straight up hating, like really hating. And then some were already using siege and like, hey, welcome to the bandwagon, right? But there was like a range or mixed reviews at the time, but I invested in siege shortly after that. So I played a whole KVK with it, had a lot of fun with it, it was great. And then obviously I'm in KVK now, and I've got to use it a little bit just during altars. Okay, so first the question between Gajah Mada or Margaret. Without just going over their kit in depth, here's what you're choosing from, okay? Margaret is gonna do more damage. Gajah Mada is way tankier and has way more sustain because he has a mighty heal and a regular heal, whereas Margaret just has one heal for expertise. If you're in a short murder ball situation where the fighting's not that long, Margaret's going to do better. But to really maximize using siege, you expect it to be on the field for a long time, sustaining and just constantly pumping out damage and only taking back counterattack damage, right? If that's the case, then Gajah Mada is going to be way better. Personally, let's go over to my engineering commanders. I'm running Margaret Cordoba. The reason why was because I just wanted to run a 5-5-1-1 Margaret. I did want to expertise Cordoba, and my plan was to just max Margaret in the dailies when she comes out, because she came out in March of 2023, whereas Gajah Mada is a lot newer, right? So I did not think they were going to come out in dailies at the same time. If you just look at their kit alone, Margaret versus Gajah Mada, at 5-5-1-1, which is what I plan on investing in for Margaret versus Gajah Mada, a 5-5-1-1 Margaret is better than Gajah Mada. But if you're talking about the full expertise and everything, Gajah Mada is better, right? So that's why I actually went with Margaret, because I had only planned on investing 180 gold heads in her to get her to 5-5-1-1, and then to work on her on the dailies. Maybe I'll max her by the time the next engineering commander comes out, but I was never really planning on investing any more gold heads into Margaret. Okay, but now that you have the choice, and if you haven't invested in either, I would actually choose Gajah Mada over, I would choose Gajah Mada over Margaret as a pairing for Cordoba, okay? Do I think you could pair those two together, Margaret and Gajah Mada? Yes, but it will be nowhere close to maximizing the potential of a siege. You have to include Cordoba in your two commander setup for, well, you have to include Cordoba in your siege setup, okay? And his expertise, it's not like the greatest ever, but it's actually really, really good. It makes a huge difference being like 5-5, 5-4 versus expertise in this commander, right? Whereas Margaret actually at 5-5-1-1 is already good enough. Gajah Mada, looking at his kit, I think you at least have to get him, where's this mighty healing? You at least have to get him to 5-5-5-1 for it to be like really good on the field. If you're just talking about 5-5-1-1 Gajah Mada, I think it's actually worse than Margaret. As far as the equipment, you can see right now, right, I have, well, I don't have the accessories on here, but I would normally run a horn. And then if I could choose any accessory to run, I would actually be a horn right now, and then a greatest glory. The emulating plume isn't that good for Margaret or Gajah Mada right now, because they both have kind of like the Sargon effect, where it's for the next 3 seconds, for the next 5 seconds for Gajah Mada, right? You're dealing a little bit more damage on the normal attack, or essentially the basic attack. And if you have the immolating plume and you're increasing the damage of that basic attack by 30% or whatever their percentage is, you're not really getting a lot. Once you actually get another engineering commander, say like Cordoba, that just has one big damage factor, then the immolating plume is going to be a lot more powerful. Whereas like right now, I think the greatest glory, because you're going to do 5% more normal damage, it's a lot more consistent, and it actually will apply to Margaret and Gajah Mada, and also still, you know, you're essentially doing 5% more all damage with Cordoba, which is really, really good. Okay. The equipment, I've seen people say that you can run blue gear, you can run all epic. It really depends on the competition level you're at, right? So I can't speak for, say, like an easier or harder competition level, but the competition level that 2268 has been fighting at would be, well, since I've been here, is like high A and then like low M kingdoms, right? So it's not the very, very top where you're fighting like 1093, like 2377 and those guys, even though I know a lot of the players that are in those kingdoms now because they were here or we fought against them before. But at the high A, low imp level, I would say all epic expertise, crit, and then the legs and the boots is definitely good enough. And the reason why for the legs and boots, because all these legendary pieces give you march speed, all the epic pieces give you march speed, but the legendary legs and the boots actually don't give you march speed, right? Whereas when you go to the legendary counterpart of it, not only do you get more march speed, but also you could get that 2-piece bonus for 5% more damage for defense. So if I had to do, say, like a high A, low imp, a bare minimum, you could probably get away with it if you set it up really well and say like an altar doing all epic. But for it to really be a lot more viable, I think all epic and then legendary legs and boots is probably like where you want to shoot for starting out. And then starting out for Gajah Mada, Cordoba, I mean, you could do a 5-5-1-1 for both. It'll do okay, but I would say Cordoba doesn't really get unleashed until you expertise him. Gajah Mada probably at least 5-5-5-1, and then Margaret 5-5-1-1. Hence, one of the reasons why I actually decided to invest in Margaret when I thought that I would actually be getting her dailies only and not Gajah Mada. Okay. Now, as far as when you should be investing in Siege, I want to say when I first made the video 5 months ago, Siege was very underrated. Now it's actually slightly overrated. Okay. Biggest thing people don't think about is, okay, you get these great trades, but when can you actually use it, right? So obviously in a ruin or altar, you could use it. When big murder ball fights where there's not a lot of movement, you can use it. But if the ball is getting wiped and there's a lot of movement, especially if your side is winning and you have to go into enemy territory, you can't bring a siege there with field marches. Because if you try to bring a siege there with field marches, once the siege gets left behind and it takes like 8 seconds to break down, right? People will come out of their city just to swarm it down, and you'll take really, really bad trades. Whereas if the ball's not moving, you can set it up in a good spot. Once you get like 1 or 2 skill cycle off, you're going to be trading massively positive, right? So if you're investing in a siege as a main and you only have siege, then you could get away with it. But if you actually have any aspirations of using field marches, in my opinion, siege should be your 4th march at the earliest. Because, for example, if you invested in a field march, let's just say you're doing Lucia William Wallace right now, right? And then your 2nd march, you decide to go siege. There's going to be a lot of instances where you have to choose either using the field march or the siege march, but you can't use both, right? Because if you try to control both, and the ball's moving a lot, like one's going to get out of position, you won't do really well, right? So if you actually only have 2 marches, one siege, one field, a lot of scenarios, you're only going to be able to use one of the marches, right? Whereas if you're getting to your 4th march, fine, you know, like some of the times you can't use a siege march, but you could at least still use 3 field marches. And then sometimes maybe you just want to use the siege, and then you're going to actually have to bench your field marches. But like, you can definitely control siege and field. It makes it a little bit more, in my opinion, kind of like a StarCraft, right? There's a lot more micromanaging you have to go on. It takes a little bit more skill. It actually makes it a lot more fun, in my opinion. It's just there are certain instances where you're just not going to be able to use field and siege. Okay, so quick summary. If you're choosing between Margaret and Gajah Mada, Gajah Mada is better in almost all circumstances. The only circumstance I would say where Margaret has an edge is she does more damage. So if you're doing a shorter murder ball fight where you just want that march to do a lot more damage over, say, like a minute or 2 minute time, Margaret probably has the advantage. But if it's like a longer sustain, not only is Gajah Mada a lot more tanky, it actually has like 2 heals, a heal and a mighty heal. Over time, it's going to trade a lot better. And then also how far to get the equipment. I think at a higher or more competitive level that I'm at, I think all epic crit, and then you get the legs and the boost. Obviously don't have enough iconic crystals. My account is younger. Obviously you would like to have iconic crystals, it'll be a lot stronger. And then as far as how far you get the commanders, Cordoba, it's just one you should expertise. He's really good. Gajah Mada, if you want to stop at a minimum, I think you need to get to 5551. Margaret, you could actually get away with 5511 in my opinion, with an expertise Cordoba. Okay, but like the equipment depends on the competition level. As far as pulling armaments, it's kind of weird because if you're essentially forced to pull a V formation, right? And for me, I just wanted to make sure I have at least an inscription on each legendary, and I just stopped pulling for V formation. That's where kind of I stopped. Obviously, I rolled it where it's all relevant stats, but I don't think. I mean, does it make a difference? Yes, but like, can you have like average armaments and then get the other stuff where I said and still do pretty well? Yes. The big thing with Siege is whether you actually get to launch your active skills. It builds rage really slow, right? So the first skill cycle takes forever, which is why like a horn is almost mandatory on a Siege. And then as far as the second accessory, right, you have the Immolating Plume, which is designed specifically for Siege, but really not that great right now if you're using Margaret or Gajah Mada. I think Greatest Glory is probably the best right now if you're using Cordoba. You can obviously go over Ring, but the Horn is actually the first thing you want for engineering, okay? Finally, I think if you're using Siege, unless you just are really rich in resources, I think T4 is the way to go. So if you actually look at my research here, right, I don't have T5 Siege unlocked. Oh wait, that's Crystal. Right, I'm working on it. This is just because I'm doing Alliance mobilization. Hopefully they don't take that away where you could use research time as the speeds used. But I actually don't have T5 unlocked. Okay, so if you like the way the stats work in this game, when you're comparing T4 to T5, T4 is probably about 10% less damage output than T5. Okay, so T5 would do about 10% more damage. It's really close. You can't really tell that much of a difference. But because the defense and health is lower, right? The base stat is lower. So if we pull this up, if you look at like, say like a Royal Knight, right? Like there's attack, defense, and health. The attack will be lower for T4 compared to T5, right? But because the defense and health is lower, it comes down to T4 is probably about 65 to 70% as tanky as a T5. So when you're using T4 to T5, what you're going to notice is damage output is about the same, but it's going to be a lot squishier, right? So for a field march, that makes a huge difference. But for a siege march, if you set it up right and you're only taking counterattack damage, it doesn't make that as big of a difference. And if you're still doing about 90% of the damage output anyways, but it's so much cheaper to run, T4 than T5. And also when you run T4, you can almost do anything and trade positive. I actually think for most people, T4 is the way to go for siege and not T5 for those reasons. Okay, so invest in Gajah Mada if you plan on maxing or at least getting both the 5551. And then I don't know when this next engineering commander is going to come out. It also might replace Gajah Mada or Margaret. I'm pretty confident that Cordoba's here to stay. If you are doing siege, unless you plan on just maining siege and you're like playing on your phone, you're going to do siege marches or something, still work on your field march first. I feel like siege went from severely underrated to slightly overrated now. And if you're actually investing in siege before you have 3 field marches and you plan on doing field and siege, I think you're actually making a mistake because you're literally going to have times where you just can't use the siege march. And if you're going to put all those like gold heads, like armaments, equipment into a siege march, and then you have like a chunk of time when you can't use it because you're trying to run your field marches instead, it's probably not as worth it. Okay, so this video actually ended up being a lot longer than I thought, but hopefully it kind of got you guys caught up and gave you at least a basic template or a plan on what to do next if you are interested in siege. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the video. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.